From Del Rio, Texas, home of Lake Amistad, your host, Rob Wade. This guy who dives. This episode of This Guy Who Dives recorded live Saturday, 16 April 2016, episode 160. Don't be a statistic. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of This Guy Who Dives, and I am your host, Rob Wade, and I was out last week, had a number of things going on challenging the ability to get the podcast out, the netcast going, and it looks like I may have some challenges again next week. Yours truly will be going TDY, that's temporary duty, for those who are non-military affiliated, not hip to the lingo, and so it's a good chance that I won't be back in the little burg of Del Rio in time to actually do the netcast. I'm not sure, but rather than chance, I'm just going to let you know right now. Don't plan on having the netcast next weekend because of that. If I do make it back in time, I'll probably be so exhausted from the drive. Oh, I got another of my dogs wanting to come up here. Let me put her on the guest chair. You stay right there, little girl. What a profile. That I will be too exhausted to do the netcast. I certainly won't have time to do the prep. I'll be helping with the inspection system for the Air Force. I'll be looking at helping one of the bases. So it's a good 6-hour drive from here. So I'll be pooped, as they say. Sorry about the delay this evening. Run into a number of challenges. This time, believe it or not having to do with the actual XSplit software. That's good to go. They haven't had any updates recently. This is actually to do with issues with Windows 10. I've got it on our server. I've been testing it on there. Take advantage of some of the security features that it brings to bear. I tell you, get more and more frustrated every time they update something with Windows 10 because it makes me hate it that much more. And as it turns out, having the latest updates to the Edge browser that I normally have running up on the server here, I've got a big screen TV attached to the server as its monitor, and so I normally have the netcast up and running so I can see what you guys see and kind of get a flavor for about what the delay is. Unfortunately, Edge has been updated to add a number of features or at least prepare for the adding of features and has hobbled it. It was a crappy browser to begin with. I much prefer Internet Explorer, and got Edge up and running, and all of a sudden it tried to connect to Ustream and just was choking on it. So once again, Microsoft fails with this new operating system, and which we're going to talk more about that here in a second. I don't have any movie reviews this week because there was nothing I want to go see, and as I've said before, there is no way I'm going to spend any money to watch Ben Affleck as Batman. So I'm not interested in seeing Batman versus Superman. And I know two people who have admitted they saw the movie, and neither of them cared for it. They said, it was meh. And the reviews are pretty much the same way. Ben Affleck sucks as Batman, as I expected he would. He sucked as Daredevil, and I knew he would suck as Batman. And I just can't stand him as an actor anyway. So that's a whole slew of DC Comics movies that I'm just not going to see because that means the Justice League movies, not interested. Supposedly, Ben Affleck has said that he's going to direct and star in a solo Batman movie. Again, not going to waste my money on it. So I will stick to, as far as DC Comics go, I'm going to stick to watching the DC stuff on television. I'm infinitely more impressed with it anyway. Love Arrow, love Flash, love Legends of Tomorrow, and I'm warming up to Supergirl. I'm hearing rumors that they may actually have Tom Welling, who was Clark Kent in the very, very popular Smallville series. He may actually, and by the way, that was another CW network show. The rumor is that he might actually don the Superman costume for an appearance in Supergirl, which would be great. I think that'd be fantastic. So, looking forward to that if in fact it does happen. Let's see. Jumping back to the tech news segment. I mentioned that Microsoft has released a new version of Windows 10 and new version of Windows 10 Mobile. For Windows 10 Mobile, it's update if you're on the Insider Preview Threads program. That version, the Redstone path or thread or stream, whatever you want to call it, is 14322, and it was much anticipated because it was going to be introducing as the birthday anniversary version or something. They were going to be adding a number of the more advanced features that they were trying to bring to the OS, a number of those affecting the action or the notification feature center, which I don't use. I have no use for that. I've got live tiles. I use the live tiles. That is how I get notified. If I have, as you can see here, if you look, there's a number on the live tiles that tell me, hey, I've got 99 plus emails that I've not read yet. And then on one of my other accounts, I've got one email not read. If I were using the notification center, it kind of comes down from the top. And what they did was they added some customization features there, so you can rearrange the order. You can uncheck which one. You can select which ones of those are actually showing up on the notification center. And another thing they did was, again, a non-issue for me because I don't use the notification center. What they started doing was, instead of having individual lines with the icon of the types of notifications, see, I have the weather channel app, and then you have Outlook Mail and Facebook and so forth. Instead of having, basically they just put a heading, and then you have all your outstanding notifications for that. Non-issue for me. Again, I don't have no use for the notification center. All I need to know is on the live tiles, if I got outstanding messages, I'll get to them. Now, among the things that were broken on this, if you have a 950, a Lumia 950 or 950 XL, guess what? The Hello Windows thing is broken as far as the infrared scanner. Interesting. Let's see if I can get to it. If you'll notice, I think it works. It happens every time. There's an infrared scanner on here that actually scans your iris and lights it up so it can tell who you are. So that is the biometric feature on the 950 and the 950 XL. The problem is it doesn't work very well anyway. It's got a pretty limited lighting range that it works in. If you're out in real bright sunlight, forget it. It's not going to see you properly. But it's completely broken now with this update. So what's supposed to happen is when you press the button to unlock, it's supposed to come up and try to scan your iris. Or you can go ahead and key in your PIN if you've got it secured with a PIN. I find that it takes me much less time to put in my PIN than it does to get it to find my iris. Well, now with 14322 update, it doesn't even work at all. What happens is the iris scanner turns on when you're not trying to lock it. So I think what we're seeing consistently happen is if I turn it off or kill the display, the iris scanner comes on. There you go. See? On your screen, it looks white. It's actually a red light because it's infrared. So what's supposed to happen is it's not supposed to come on when you turn it off. It's supposed to come on when you turn it on. Instead, it does nothing. And so I have to do this. And now, maybe 50% of the time, it'll actually look for me. And notice now I have to put in my PIN. So hugely broken. It's funny. If you plug in your headphones to the 950 and 950 XL, I don't know if this happens on other devices. I've not tested this on the 640 or 635. If you plug in your headphone and you're listening to it, or in my case, I was plugging it into a cable that was going to my car stereo before I changed my car stereo out, and and then you unplugged it, you're done, you're getting out of your car or whatever, you unplug it, and then you do the volume control. What's supposed to happen, let's see if I can get to do it. First I have to figure out how to unlock it because I don't know whether it's going to work with the Windows Low. Okay, so what's supposed to happen is I press the rocker, and you see it gets ringer and notification. There's a little down arrow I can press to see both volumes. Now, see, this is a feature I hate anyway. I like having one rocker. It works with all the volume, no matter what I'm using. Works with ringers, works with apps, works with headphones, Bluetooth, don't care. I want the rocker to control it all, period. Unfortunately, because a lot of people who insist on micromanaging every little flipping thing on the phone, they're like, oh, I want separate volume controls for my ringers and my apps. Okay, so those idiots gave us this update. So now, in order to affect individual controls, I have to activate the rocker because there's no other way to get to it. I have to activate the rocker, and then I have to do the down arrow to adjust the faders or to mute them, because you can't just do it with one control. And if you plug headphones in, it switches to where it's only the headphones that it controls. You don't have a choice to adjust anything else. If you're on Bluetooth, same way. Okay, so you can't adjust the other volumes if it's superseded by you plugging it in or using Bluetooth. Okay, so that's a major fail in my book. Well, with this update, actually with the last few updates, if I plug in the headphones and unplug them, I don't get those two faders back. It stays in headphone mode until I reboot the phone. How stupid is that? So again, it's just one. Windows 10 is just one frustration after another. Just sickens me. So Edge sucks. Supposedly not supposedly, they did add integration. I think this is partially what has broken Edge, but they've integrated Skype with the browser, with Edge. So when you go to outlook.com, you'll see a Skype icon up there. And if you click on it, it opens up a right panel, and you can see your Skype contacts. And that's all well and good. From there, you can actually initiate a regular chat or a audio only or a video call with them. So it just works right there in the browser in Edge. I suspect making that happen is what broke it, so that it doesn't work right with Ustream. I haven't tried it with Twitch, but it's probably broken with that too. So it's very frustrating. But Microsoft's not alone with its issues. Apple continues to bomb with the iPhone SE. It's just not selling. And surprise, surprise, for the second quarter in a row, Apple has announced that they're reducing their rate of production. You know, people are still buying iPhones, but clearly I think they've hit their peak. I think we're seeing people move away from those and probably going to Android phones, or they're using mini tablets to do the kind of work that they have been doing, that they used to use iPhones for. I'm trying to adjust the brightness here. It's a little bit harsh. Oof. Yikes. Let's back that off. There we go. That's a little bit less harsh. There we go. Tone it down a bit. Okay, Lake Amistad stats right now. Visibility is about the same as before. We're talking about 10 feet or so. We've been having some storms, and as a matter of fact, we're under a flash flood watch for tonight and tomorrow. A big, if you've been following the news, the upper Midwest there around Colorado, etc., are being schwacked with some snowstorms. So I guess that's going to translate to some heavy rains our way. So they're warning that we're going to see some significant flooding as a result of that. It's been windy like crazy all day, which is one of the reasons why I wasn't able to get out to do a dive today. I would have loved to have done a dive today, considering I'm going to be gone for the week. Unfortunately, while it was beautiful, sunshiny for most of the day, just way too windy. It would have chopped it up pretty bad, making entry and exit a little bit hazardous, and as well as making the visibility even worse than it otherwise would be. So visibility about 10 feet, and temperatures slowly climbing up, about 58 degrees. So we're about to breach 60, I think. Hoping that we'll get some more warm weather. It just hasn't been, I just find these global warming freaks frustrating because we're not seeing it. And we got a snowstorm going on already, still this late in the year, going on up north there. And we just haven't had really a lot of hot days. It's been pretty cool. Just like it was last year. Last year was fairly cool. So that, I don't know, that's going to make for an interesting first class, which is at the end of May. So we'll see what happens with that. Get out of here. And, okay, so I'm just checking the chat room. I don't see anybody out there yet. Okay, so what we wanted to talk about, as you can see by the title, is Don't Be a Statistic. As we go into the new dive season, there's a number of things to... Oh, my phone is trying to see me. See? Isn't that interesting? It's trying to... This is just ridiculous. You're going to find a lot of people who haven't been diving for a while are going out to start back up diving. I've talked to some people already this year who said, hey, I haven't been diving in a while, but I understand that you're an avid diver and instructor, and I maybe need to get a refresher. And of course, I'm more than happy to take folks through a refresher course. The concern that I have normally is that we have folks out there who's certified, typically basic certification. They've not gone even to the advanced course, who have been very, very sparse in their diving experience, and that can lead to problems. So I'm always welcoming those who want to go through a refresher to spruce up their skills, make sure they're tight. So I'm going to be sharing some stats with you on some what has been going on, what we see, what's reported. I will qualify this by saying that most of these stats that I'll be sharing with you, they're of the dive incidents that we know data about. There are a lot of incidents, sometimes upwards of 50 or 60% of them, where they don't really know what happened because maybe the body was not recovered, or they just didn't acquire the data for the stats. But these are all courtesy of diversalertnetwork.org. As a matter of fact, let me switch to their page here, screen region. There we go. So if you go to diversalertnetwork.org, I encourage you to sign up because there's a lot of great information out there. You have access to a lot of the research they have, education, You can get training, have access to some. There's some online training you can do. They also have insurance, which is very valuable. Tara and I both have that. You can buy various products, both promotional and functional, safety related. But what I find most interesting for me, aside from the insurance, is that there's a lot of data about diving physiology, things that they're learning about the human body as far as diving, and statistical reports. So what I've done is I've accessed their dive report, their latest dive report, to get some stats to share with you. There's tons of stats there. If you want to go there, check it out, please do. But I just wanted to talk to you about some of these and just my own personal experience and thoughts as an instructor and avid diver who's, I've got quite a number of dives under my belt, and I've been diving with a number of different types of divers and seen a number of different things. So that is a great resource. Divers Alert Network, or DAN, as you can see as you saw on the logo there. So, all right. So let us check out some. So here's some dive incident statistics. In 2013, of the fatalities that they have recorded, this is interesting, and this is by no means exhaustive. And you can actually dig deeper. They have it broken down for the U.S. They have it broken down by state. By Europe, they have it by individual country. But you can see that the U.S. has had, in 2013, had 48 fatalities as a result of diving, which, given the number of divers that we have, that's a pretty small amount. So that tells you, though, that even with the successful adherence to the standards, to the training, while that means that you have a high degree of probability that you're going to not only survive the dive, but actually, fully enjoy it in the process. And so if you stick to your training, stick to your experience, you're going to enjoy yourself. But in 2013, 48 people, that wasn't the case. Europe, they had 20 people. In Asia, they had 6, which kind of surprises me. The Caribbean, specifically, 7, and Canada had 10. And like I said, there was a lot more details to that, but it's an interesting set of numbers. So that would suggest to me that the United States has by far the most divers that are active. So that's what I didn't see is what percentage of divers that would actually turn out to be. But you can see it's a significantly higher number compared to other tallied parts of the world. 82% of the victims were male. That tells you something too. That would speak to me about the aggressiveness and the competitiveness of divers. Now, here's an interesting thing. I hate sports, okay? I don't do baseball, basketball, football, none of that stuff. I don't do sports. Interestingly, our church was having a little men's get-together golfing out at the Air Force Base here. And, of course, all guys are invited. It's more of a get-together and just have fun kind of thing. But it involves a sport. Have zero interest. What did I choose to do instead? Mow my lawn. So that tells you how much I hate sports. Is I would rather mow my lawn than do a sport. Okay? So anyway, even though there's a magazine called Sport Diver and people call it a sport, I only call something a sport if it's a competitive thing by its design. I don't consider diving I don't consider diving to be a sport. There is zero competition in it for me. I don't even try to best myself, okay? In other areas, I am competitive. But when it comes to diving, it's not. I'm there to be the best diver I can, but for the purpose of enjoying the dive. That's my sole purpose. I want to have a good time. I want to relax, enjoy myself. So I'm not competing even with myself. I'm not saying, oh, I was for given a tank of air, given this depth, I was able to stay down longer this time than the previous times. No, I don't care about that. I just try to be the best diver I can. So, but I do understand that there are people who tend to be competitive. They see places they want to go, and they put themselves unnecessarily in danger to do those things, to go those places where other people haven't or don't typically go. I understand the allure of going to a place that people have never been. That's why a lot of people do the whole cave diving thing. But interestingly, those kinds of choices can be fatal, as we'll be sharing with you here. So the thing I can emphasize for divers out there is that you need to break yourself of the need to best other people, to brag about having more dives than somebody, having gone deeper than somebody. And I run into those people. Don't get me wrong. I meet those people. They're all about, hey, I dive with 2 tanks, and I went to that cave, I checked it out, and it was awesome, and not many people go there, and I made it out alive, blah, blah, blah. Childish and dangerous, not smart diving. So, but that's the competitiveness of males over females. Typically, you don't see them in that arena being that competitive. So 82% of the victims were male. But interestingly, I thought this was not intuitive. 90% of those victims, 90% of the females that were victims were 40 years old or older, compared to 78% of the males being 40 years old or older. So it seems to be that of the known data, that women are more likely to be take higher risk or run into issues when they're 40 years old or older than men, which is interesting because we're more aggressive typically, but it seems like they get into more trouble as a percentage. Now, obviously, many fewer women actually are victims, because 82% of men were victims, or 82% of the victims were men. But in the category of victims, 90% of those women were 40 years old or older, compared to 78%. So that's a pretty interesting difference there. And I'm wondering why that's true. Believe it or not, certification level was a minor factor. In other words, the distribution of fatalities, of victims across the different types of certification level, and we're talking about basic open water, advanced, rescue diver, having a number of specialties, a master diver, dive master, assistant instructor, instructor, master instructor. Pretty much spread across the board. In other words, it didn't seem that the trouble that people ran into seemed less dependent on the skill level by training. But that doesn't mean that skill level wasn't a factor, or wasn't even a major factor. It just means that whatever certification level that you held didn't seem to have a correlation of effect, which I found interesting. So if certification was a minor factor, as I mentioned a moment ago, experience turned out to be a pretty significant factor, with most victims having greater than 10 years since their certification. Now, what's not shared specifically was how many dives in that time frame. I suspect it's fairly sparse in that time frame. What you saw, what the stats seem to show, was that there were a higher percentage of incidents that happened when they were brand new. So within the first, the first few years, first couple of years, so they had very little experience. So they take chances that they don't even know that they weren't even aware of the risks they were taking, because experience hadn't taught them yet some limitations that they were going to run into. So, and then you move to 7 to 10, which are a pretty big jump, and then 10 years and greater, that was an even bigger jump. So the longer it had been since their certification, the more likely, after 10 years, they were likely to go become a fatality. So I can't emphasize enough that you need to dive as frequently as you possibly can. I don't understand why people get certified and then they only dive once every few years. There's so many places you can take advantage of a dive to keep your skills up. That is so important, because the things that you practice regularly are the things that are going to be there for you, the skills that are going to be there for you when you need them the most. If you don't practice those skills on a regular basis, and I'm not talking about just getting out there and diving, I'm talking about going out there and actually running yourself through some of those skill sets. Most people don't care for the mask clearing bit. But you need to stay proficient in that. Just because you did it through the class and passed the class with that ability doesn't mean you have that skill set down solid. And if you don't practice it on a regular basis, you can get yourself into trouble when something happens, because our problem-solving skills drop dramatically, and we get more myopic when there's an issue that comes across that starts to challenge us. So if we have some sort of a failure, or our buddy has a failure, we tend to start, our ability to encapsulate everything that's going on and go through our normal problem solving is negatively inhibited. So practice, get out there and dive as frequently as you can, at least a couple of times during the season. I recommend even more than that. If you're not doing, to me, personally, personal opinion, this is not Patty, this is not Nowie, this is my personal opinion. If you're not getting at least 5 dives a season in, you're doing yourself a disservice. And I'm not talking about doing it all in one day. Spread that across the season. Find some place that you can get out there, get some dives in, even if they're fairly shallow. We've got here in Del Rio, the big attraction is Lake Amistad. Okay, I get that. But the truth is, we have a number of places locally. We have San Felipe Creek, which is about 10 feet if at its deepest point. But that's a place to get experience too. And it's because it's a spring, it's 76 degrees year round. So you can actually dive that comfortably all year. But that's a great place to just get in and kind of hone your skills up. Very, very shallow dive, but it's something to practice in. And there's something to see there. Visibility is generally good if you don't have a bunch of kids jumping around in the water, because it's fairly quick moving. And so anything that gets kicked up gets moved downstream pretty quick anyway. So I can't emphasize that enough to make so that you are less likely to become a statistic because of experience level. Now, interestingly, dive depth was also a minor factor. Generally speaking, the stats showed that the fatalities happened in shallow water to midwater to deep water. It didn't seem to matter. I mean, there was very, very little variation between any of the depth ranges and what kind of fatalities there were. So that tells me that if depth is not a factor, then it's more likely a case of whatever skills or physical situation that you're in, regardless of depth. Those are the kinds of things that could get you into trouble. If you've not been keeping in decent enough shape for diving, because we generally find that divers tend to be overweight. And I'll be honest with you, part of it is the culture of diving, because usually the kinds of people that enjoy diving enjoy a number of other social activities. And so what you will find, whether it's a dive boat, a liveaboard, or people going to Belize for a week, whatever the situation is. They tend to go out a day of diving, come back, do some maybe some touristy stuff, and then party at night. So, and I'll be honest with you, I hear a lot of conversations about, alcohol and getting drunk between divers on the typical dive boats. So I know that's the culture that's kind of driven. Hey, where are you going to, let's hit this club tonight. Okay, so now you've got alcohol introduce your system, and they typically go out and eat a lot, and there's a lot, believe it or not, there's a high percentage of smokers that are also divers. So all of these things can be negative impactors to you having a safe dive. Okay, so those are the kinds of factors that typically are going to show up as issues for divers. And so it doesn't matter how deep you are, whether you're in 30 feet of water or 130 feet of water. The same kinds of things that make you accident prone or just have bad judgment will happen at any depth. Okay, panic can set in shallowest of waters. In fact, that doesn't. I can see from experience it doesn't seem to matter how deep you are. Interestingly enough, buddy separation versus not being separated, the difference in fatalities was nearly identical. And believe it or not, there was a slight edge in the number of fatalities that were attributed to. There was a slight edge in the not separated, which means that. It means that what you're going to see is there's probably some panic factors or issues driven by the fact of dive buddies maybe having a situation. We try to tell people you should be diving with a buddy anyway. A relatively lower number of fatalities, believe it or not, happen as part of solos. Now, interestingly, of the separated dives, you would kind of argue that that's what kind of happens with people. They get separated, and so they're by themselves, and that's why diving by yourself is dangerous. Well, a slightly higher number of the fatalities were involved buddies who weren't separated. What that means, though, if you factor in the number of divers that were fatalities as intentionally solo, intentionally self-assisted, or self-reliant divers, as Patty calls them, those folks have intentionally been trained or trained themselves to include the types of redundancy that a dive buddy would normally afford. So they have a completely separate secondary air source. They have a number of bits of redundancy throughout their equipment, and they tend to take less risk as a part of their dive, which of course is great. Whereas with dive buddies, there seems to be this weird feeling of invincibility or lower risk because I have a dive buddy. But you'll notice that slightly less than half the time, it's that overconfidence that drives them to get further and further away from their buddy or just simply lose track of them. I was reading about a dive incident where these two divers, they'd had quite a bit of experience under their belt, but they were both basic certified, and they were diving on a wreck. They were diving on a wreck, and they intentionally, without any kind of training or other briefing, their intent was to dive down to this wreck and then penetrate into the wreck to a well-known cargo hold that not a lot of people go to. Well, the thing is, whether you're diving in a cave or penetrating a wreck, you generally need the training that goes with it. There's equipment that you need. We talk about this, the 3 E's: education, equipment and experience. And those become a kind of a never-ending cycle. As you get the education and you learn what you need to know about that type of diving, then you get the equipment that goes with it, and then you get the experience. And once you've pulled those together, then you can look at advancing yourself by getting more education on another type of diving, and you get the equipment that goes with that. And then you go out and get the experience that all affords you. But what these two guys did was they had no cave dive training, and they had no wreck penetration, or what we generally lump together as overhead type diving, where there's something that blocks your direct ascent to the surface. And one of the basic rules you have for that kind of diving is the rule of thirds. So you have you keep 1/3 for your actual dive, 1/3 for getting back up, and then 1/3 for any eventuality of unanticipated issues. Okay, that's your buffer. So that means that basically in a typical 80 cubic foot tank, pressurized to 3,000 psi, you are going to be turning your dive at about 2,000. Okay, so that means as soon as you drop, one of you drops down to 2,000 psi in your tank, which doesn't take long, especially if you're going deep. These guys were going to like 100 feet. You're going to be turning around and working your way back out. Okay, and then you need that extra 1,000 to just as spare. Now, keep this in mind. While the rule of thirds means that you have that last 1,000 psi as spare, you should be surfacing. You should be on the surface with no less than 500 psi. So really, you're giving yourself 500 psi as backup air, if you will. Okay. So these guys were going down there, and they penetrated the wreck. They didn't put out a dive line or anything. No guideline to work their way back. The one guy rocketed inside, left his buddy in his wake. His buddy lost him because he was looking down another side corridor or something in the ship, and then realized, hey, my buddy's gone. See, that's why you got to stay together, communicate, don't lose sight of each other. And so he waited for a minute, and then he headed back out and worked. And then he waited outside the ship for a few minutes, to the time that they said they were going to get back out, and then he surfaced. Well, eventually, bottom line was, the guy didn't surface. They sent out recovery divers, and they found him in the cargo hold, completely out of air. Obviously, he had drowned because he ran out of air, and that's typically what happens. You get out of air and you drown. And all because they took risk that they shouldn't have been taking without the appropriate training and experience to go with it. Okay? So the bottom line is, if you're diving with a buddy, you keep with your buddy. You remember the 1 minute rule. If you lose sight of your buddy, then you search for 1 minute and then you come to the surface. So you know that you're never more than a minute away from meeting up with your buddy at the surface. Okay? So what in the world happened to... That's interesting. My Surface Pro Facebook app was doing something weird. Interesting. Oh, congratulations to my, by the way, sidebar, congratulations to my friend Tyler Hamill, who just completed his C-17 pilot training. He'd gone through basic undergraduate pilot training here at Laughlin, graduated, did well, and then he went off to Altus Air Force Base to learn his specific aircraft, which of course is the C-17, and he successfully completed that. So congratulations, it's awesome. Anyway, don't get overconfident just because you have a dive buddy. Even if you've been diving with that person for a while, anything can happen that can take either of you off your game, where you are overcome by bad judgment or failed equipment that can cause that myopic death spiral of reduced problem-solving skills. Okay? Make sure you stick with your buddy. but make sure that you don't get separated from them. And if you do get separated, you take the appropriate steps. Don't exceed your experience and training, no matter how enticing it is. These are the kinds of things that 82% of victims being male is a factor in. It's like, oh, I got to go to this place that not many people go. Because this guy's intent was, these two guys, their intent was to get down there, get into that cargo hold, take a selfie, because they brought a camera with them, probably a GoPro. Take a selfie, and then show it to everybody. Okay, that is no reason to put your life at risk. Okay? All right, so let's look at the next one. The overwhelming majority of fatalities were at depth, as in this case that I just shared with you. Very few were at the surface or on during ascent as a percentage. So that means that people got down to depth. They probably exceeded their experience and training, got into trouble, and made fatal decisions at depth. Now, often those fatal decisions, for those that the fatalities were upon surfacing or while ascending, the genesis was typically a trigger down at depth, and then they figured, okay, I need to get to the surface, and so they did things like ascending while holding their breath, or ascended too quickly and creating air embolisms, those kinds of things. Okay, so second and third order effects because of bad judgment. But the overwhelming majority, I mean, it was like 70% of the fatalities were at depth. So that tells you that means they had to go after and recover the bodies. Out of air was the most common known trigger. Now, believe it or not, probably 50% of the triggers were not known at all. In other words, they weren't sure exactly what triggered it. But of the ones that they knew, the out of air was the most common trigger. And that means that they weren't following things like the rule of thirds. They weren't setting a firm bingo time for their air, where you decide, okay, we're the first person to this amount, to this PSI, we're going to turn around, we're going to start our surface, no matter where we're at, okay? Or doing things like penetrating a wreck where they're not trained for it, or penetrating a cave where they're not trained for it and don't have the equipment for it, but not checking their air. And that's one of the reasons why PADI now makes a requirement of PADI now requires instructors to keep having their students check their air. We are required now to we tell them we're going to check regularly, and they must be within 300 psi either way, up or down, of their air. So I have to randomly just check, hey, ask what's your air, and then they have to report it without looking, because they should have been looking on a regular basis. So when they look at their air, they should be making a mental note of what that is. It's an easy thing to look at it and not register it, but they are supposed to look at it on a regular basis. And so that when I, as an instructor, just off the cuff say, ask them how much air, what do you got? They should, without looking, be able to tell me within 300 psi what their air is. And then I check to see how close they are. If they're way off the mark, then I need to get them to look even more frequently, because that means they're not. So for out of air to be a situation, you either have not been checking your air frequently enough, or you've had some sort of catastrophic failure of air escaping from your system. In which case, that's why you got to keep by your buddy, because they are your alternate air. Unless you are a solo diver, in which case you typically are going to have a completely separate, fully contained air system for that you can use to bail yourself out. That's what I do. I have a secondary system. All right, let's see. And speaking of cave and wreck divers, twice as many untrained cave divers die as trained ones. Twice as many. And that tells you something. They're making choices born of not knowing what they don't know. Again, I go back to 3 E's. You get the education. There's specific training. There's specific specialty for cave diving and for wreck diving, where you learn all the different skills. The rule of thirds just being a small part of it. You'll learn about how to run dive lines. You learn about using the little flags to tell you the direction to the opening, the direction if you have forks in the cave system. You learn how to apply those things. You learn how to stage air bottles at different places depending on how far you're going to penetrate. There are all these things to consider that you learn as part of that, and then you go out and buy that equipment, the lines, the torches, the little flags for the lines. You learn how to use those things. You buy that equipment, and then you go out and get the experience. You start with shallow caves and you practice that. Then you get a little bit further in. You build your skills up by using the skills that you learned, and then the tools, the equipment that go with that. Okay. So those are just some of the examples of statistics that you don't want to become one of. Okay, you want to make sure you get the appropriate training. Resist the urge to be competitive as a diver. Instead of trying to best yourself, what you want to do is hone your skills so that you are ready for any given situation. That it doesn't matter. Whether it's a deep dive or a shallow dive, you're ready for it because your skills are tight. And like I said, I recommend that you do no fewer than 5 dives in a season, no matter where you're at. Find some place. There's always some place you can go. And it's easier if you own your own gear. Okay? It's easier if you own your own gear. If you have everything that you need, then all you got to do is get an air fill. Okay? And then just go places. Plan to go places to dive. Get your buddy, preferably if you're married, it's your spouse, and you go out and dive. You get those dives done. So that way you got the experience, your skills are tight. Practice those. Go through them. Practice the regulator removal and recovery. Practice the mask removal and replacement. I tell you, that's a big one to me. If you get so where removing the mask and putting it back on is not even an issue for you, then you know if something happens, you're not going to panic when that happens. Practice your assisted air skills. Practice the low on air, out of air, give me your alternate air source. Practice those with your dive buddy. Here's the thing. When you go to places, like the Caribbean, you want to be relaxed, okay? You want to just enjoy those. When you have local diving opportunities, when you go out to lakes and creeks and things like that, those are the places that you can specifically say, okay, for the first part of this dive, we're just going to sit at the bottom of 10 feet of water, 15 feet of water, whatever, and we're just going to go through some skills. So you talk about that surface, pre-dive planning, and you decide, hey, we're going to go through these skills. So and this is where those little dive slates are really handy. You can mark those and say, okay, here's the dive skills I want us to practice when we get down. And then we're going to go off. After we get those done, we're solid with those, we're going to go around and just enjoy the area. So plan out 3 or 4 dive skills to practice. Say we're going to do the regulator recovery, removal and recovery. Say we're going to do the mask removal and replacement. Say we're going to do just go through some skills, especially the ones you feel less confident about. Those are the best ones you want to practice. But do that as part of your local diving experience. It'll be nothing but a benefit for you. So you're less likely to run into that myopic death spiral of poor decision making born of some sort of a trigger, whether it's because of failure of your equipment or your buddy's equipment, or something that you couldn't anticipate, because you will have practiced the air. When I'm diving recreationally with people, I check their air, because I'm usually leading the dive, because I'm usually the most experienced diver, or I'm certainly usually the most experienced diver in that locale, so I'm going to lead the dive. So I typically will look back on a very frequent basis, and I'm okay. What's your air? And then they'll look and they'll tell. Typically, what's just funny is I'll notice with even experienced divers, that's when they'll look at their air. So I will do it frequently because the chances are they're not. But you don't want to be that guy or that girl. You want to be the one that checks your air on a regular basis, so that when somebody like me, who's very conscientious about that, I'm going to be asking you about your air. You're going to be able to spout it off within just a couple of hundred psi, because you will have been looking at it frequently. Okay. All right. A little bit more fun stuff here. I've got a wetsuit, a shorty by Camaro, and I really love the suit. It's very, very stylish, although, it's kind of showing its wear and tear. And I was noticing the latest, is it Sport Diver? No, Scuba Diving magazine that Camaro had. Camaro had an advertisement for some new wetsuits, and I just wanted to kind of plug them a little bit. Not because I'm trying to sell their gear. I don't sell gear. But I do like their suits, and they're maintaining their reputation as having really cool looking wetsuits. So let me see if I can get the screen working here. Boom, boom, boom. Back. Oh, go to English. Hello. It's redrawing here. Bum, bum. There we go. Okay, so their products. Okay, so they have stuff for diving and for surfing. Interestingly, their shorties, you'll notice, are in their surfing line. I like, let's see if I can get to it. Shorties. There we go. I just really think these are really stylish. And what I like is that they're the diagonal zip. My wife loves those. And I have a, oops, what happened? There we go. I have a sleeveless shorty that's a diagonal zipper. And I got to say, that is very, very convenient to climb into. And I like this. I love the color. Now, sad for me, I love the color purple, and they don't seem to make a lot of suits in purple that have purple accents for guys, but clearly they do for women. Dun, dun. And that's a bright orange. I don't know that I like the bright orange, but I love that purple. That is just awesome. I love the white accent, though. That's pretty cool. And then they have this thing called an impact shorty. I guess for surfing, it's kind of important because basically, now this would not be good for diving because while it looks really cool, it's like a superhero type suit, but that is actually padding. It says integrated shock protection and floating aids on the chest, back, and sides. So that tends to make it helpful as a surfer so that you're more likely to float. So buoyancy actually is a positive thing for them. Whereas as a scuba diver, you'd like it to be as neutral as possible. So, yeah, I really like that suit. Now, for the diving arena, get back to that. Hello. Let's go to the titanium. These are all going to be full wetsuits. There we go. But those are sharp looking as well. So you got your 7 mil, your 5 mil, your 3 mil, and your 1. So these are full wetsuits. So in the 7 mil, oops. What? Oh, they have a page problem. Dun, dun. So I like the teal accents. And then they have the red. Let's see if they can show the 5 mil. Oh, there we go. 5 mil page is working. See, I love the accent lines. And again, the diagonal zipper. Gotta say that's a plus. That is so, makes it so much easier to get into. I like that. See, the girls get the purple. I'm so frustrated. I wish the guys had a purple one. And then you have the 3 mil. There we go. Again, purple for the women. I like the teal. I like that. I would have liked the side panels to be white. That would be cool. And then you have the 1 mil. So again, slight variation on the teal. And that's a back zip one on both of these. Probably because it's easier in a 1 mil to do that. So some great wetsuits there. They have some dry suits and semi-dries. As a matter of fact, let me look at the semi-dries, what they have. Looks like they have the same color combinations for those. But I think are they all? No. See, look at that. Really looks good in the water too. Yeah. Sweet. Yeah. I really like those wetsuits. So that's Camaro for you. That is that's some good stuff. That is some good stuff. Camaro wetsuits. I haven't even looked at what the prices of those are. They might be available at leisurepro.com. You can check them out, or divers-supply.com. See if they carry those. You may have to go to places like Scubadog.com, which they tend to be more expensive. I tried to shop at leisurepro.com or diverssupply.com because they're less expensive. Check the chat room here. No, nobody there. All right. A little administrivia before we shut her down. Dun, dun. Let's see. I'm actually going to have to postpone the 21 April Dive Club meeting this month because of this TDY I'm going on. So we will not have that 21st April. It'll be moved to May. Dive classes for this year, if you want to sign up, these are the basic classes. I can do the advanced and rescue diver, etc. if I have interest, if people have interest, express interest in it. So these are basic classes, May 26th through the 29th, June 23rd through the 26th, July 28th through the 31st, August 25th through the 28th, and September 22nd through the 25th. You definitely want to sign up for the classes, and sign up no later than the first week of the month of the class, so I can get your materials to you so you have plenty of time for self-study. Because there is a workbook. If you don't do the online academics portion, which costs you, you do separately, it costs you $150, I think, straight to Patty. If you want to have plenty of time to do the self-study, which there's a workbook and DVD that you go through, then that's why I have you sign up no later than the first week of the month of the class. So for May, you would need to sign up the first week of May at the latest. Now, if you want to sign up in May so you get your materials, but then not take the actual class till July, that's fine. You can sign up as early as you want, but no later than the first week of the month of the class. The upstagers are performing this weekend and next weekend. Next weekend, Vanya and Sonia and Masha and Spike. It is a hilarious show. Stars a number of good friends of ours who we've known for a long time in the upstagers that we've acted with in a number of shows. And this is hilarious. I got to show you this. Switch this camera. Oh, you may not be able to see it. No, you can't. Darn. That dog you see in the other chair. She's dreaming. Her tail is just going. You can't tell because the board is the soundboard is blocking her tail. It's just kind of tapping as she gets going. It's hilarious. hilarious. I love watching dogs dream. It's hilarious. Anyway, this show is funny. It's a kind of, it's a set in current time. So they actually have a big spiel about texting and Twitter and Facebook and, you know, how the good old days were so much better and that kind of thing. Very funny story. Well written, well acted by our good friends. If you are in the Del Rio area, check that out. Go to the Paul Pogue Theater for the Performing Arts. It's downtown on Main Street. Can't miss it because it used to be the Rita movie theater, but now it's turned into it's been turned into a live performing arts theater. So Vanya and Sonia and Masha and Spike. Hilarious show. Well worth going to see it. It's actually almost done at this point. But see it next weekend, the 22nd and 23rd. Well worth your time. You know, there is good cultural type things you can do in Del Rio. And for a very, very small price, you can enjoy some fine community theater. Here's the thing. A lot of folks don't realize that you don't, just because you're community theater doesn't mean you're schlepping it. We are award winning. The Upstagers have won a number of awards throughout the state and even outside the state. Yours truly has been in a state champion play that the Upstagers have produced, and got when we went to regionals in Oklahoma, I got all-star cast. So the Upstagers produce some quality theater. We pull off shows that you would not expect community theater to pull off. You know, this isn't like high school type stuff, although we do have a number of high school people who participate. But this is quality stuff on a shoestring budget, because it's nonprofit theater. So because we're part of the Texas Nonprofit Theater Organization, TNT. And we've pulled off shows that people that come here from all over the country. You know, beautiful thing about Texas, especially South Texas, is we have a lot of snowbirds or winter Texans. In other words, people who live in the northern tier and they come here during the winter. Okay, so they come here in the colder months, and they come see our shows and stuff. So so many people have come here and said, hey, I've gone to shows in Broadway. I've seen professional touring groups do shows, and you guys are right up there with them. And you pull that off with not nearly the budget they have to do all the great special effects and special fly systems for doing cool things. We pull off what would not seem to be imaginable at our level. We pulled off Into the Woods last year, and that was an endeavor. Let me tell you, it was the hardest show we've ever done, but it came off amazingly well. And we actually have it up on YouTube. You can check it out if you want to. We had a great time doing the show ultimately, and very rewarding. And we pulled off stuff on this little stage that we have. It's a very small stage. We pulled off stuff that was just amazing. So encourage you if you're in Del Rio area this next week, please check out this show. It's so worth it. Let's finish up the administrative here. So if you want to keep up with what's going on, just check out our web page, delriodiveclub.com, or follow us on Facebook. Just look for Del Rio Dive Club. You can send us messages via Skype. Let's just look for TGWD, which stands for This Guy Who Dives. And also throwing in, again, A Pet's Wish, still hanging on there, still has animals that are taken care of. They desperately need your volunteerism. They need your donations of money as well as supplies, because it takes a lot to take care of all these animals, to pay for the vet bills, to bring them back to health, because they come to them in such a variety of physical states. It's just heart-wrenching to see how some of these animals are brought to them or dumped. And they do a Herculean or Herculean, however you want to pronounce it, job of trying to rescue these animals. A Pet's Wish. Just check them out on Facebook, A Pet's Wish, or they do have a website as well. So check them out. And, of course, as always, If you'd like to send me email directly, just look down here. Just send it to robert.wade@cetifox.net. That's my email address. Or you can follow me on Twitter. Just look for Robert CFP. Now, I'll warn you, I'm very, very, very prolific on Twitter, and it tends to be a lot of political stuff. I talk about other stuff too, but this is a very, very charged election season, and so I'm very, very prolific in my opinions and trying to advance an agenda, as they say, advance a philosophy. So if you want to put up with that, you can follow me on Twitter. I'll follow you back unless you're really, really annoying, or if you're a Trump supporter. I'll follow you anyway. But so check it out. I hope that you guys get something out of the episode this week. And as a reminder, probably will not have an episode next weekend because I'll be either on my way back from TDY or exhausted from coming back from TDY. But we'll look at setting things back into our regular schedule the following week. So hope you all have a great week this week. If you dive, be safe. Dive with your buddy. Don't get separated. Make sure you practice your skills. And we will see you next time on another episode of This Guy Who Dives. See ya.